Okay, hello. This is part two of this 8-part series for the CISSP domains. Once again, this isn't the most comprehensive of videos. This is just my take. I'm doing this specifically because I recently passed it and wanted to share some thoughts on notes that worked, didn't, and maybe a few stories that were helpful. The real world stories were definitely helpful in putting me in the right frame of mind of knowing what to expect. So with that, this video is going to be on asset security domain 2. The elevator pitch for that would be how to protect assets from cradle to grave. Really simple, simplest explanation I can give. And yes, I'm not scripting any of these. I'm just literally shooting from the hip. So asset security and cradle to grave. So one thing that meant for what I was studying for and what I've dealt with in the past is you get a new asset and classifying what it is, what it's doing. You have to determine the asset value and all that other stuff, right? So this isn't just that. This is also classifying the data on it. So depending on where you're at, if you're working with government, you might deal with different classification levels. You may deal with, and especially depending on what industry you're working in. So you're working for healthcare, you got to deal with a bunch of HIPAA-related stuff, and there's different things you have to do to be aware of how you protect and control it. Same with manufacturing, finance, etc. I'll stick to the things that were in this domain specifically. One thing I did notice, I had some notes I mentioned in the last video on domain 1 about data custodians, owners, and users. I saw some of that in the first one, but I've seen a lot more of it in asset security. So there's more of that in there, but it's all going to be revolved around the same stuff on what owner, custodian, and user ends up doing. As far as the classifications, the biggest thing I noticed in all the studying that I struggled with was distinguishing between private and public related stuff. So, being that I work, I was former military, so I remember the classification levels there. That was kind of easy. So you got your unclassified, confidential, secret, and top secret, and a bunch of other stuff beyond top secret that I never will see. So, but you're not going to see all that stuff on the exam. It's literally going to be like top secret on down, and it'll tell you different scales. Like top secret involves like national security, blah blah blah. This is all public related information you can find. The big confusion that I would struggle with is distinguishing that with the private sector related levels. So your levels here, I'm looking at some notes. It starts off at public information, stuff you'd find on a website. Then it starts going up to sensitive, then private, then confidential. Definitely get a differentiation of the two. Before I took the exam, and this is something I advise often with studying these kind of exams, is write stuff down. Like, type, sure, but definitely write it down in addition to typing. Because, like, typing it, when you're typing, you just kind of remember you hitting the keys over and over. But when you're writing it, you're kind of it commits to memory better. So the stuff like that, definitely write down. I wrote a bunch of stuff down right before the exam. So that kind of helped. Let's see, what else do we have in domain 2? States of data. That one, it's funny because I actually remember it in very many places I worked, just not really in this form. So you got 3 states data is typically in. It's either at rest, meaning it's not being used, just like files on my computer I'm not accessing right now. They're at rest. Then you have data in use. So like this GitHub repo I'm working on is in use right now. Or if I have a document open, like this document open with my notes, that's in use. And then, if I'm actively using it, then you have data in motion. So if you're emailing it or moving it over a file share, different things. And this domain in particular doesn't dive into all the protections behind it. You see a lot more of that in domain 3. But this one, it's just knowing what, definitely differentiate between what those 3 do. So let's do this. Rest. Data in use. example. Let's see. So a document on your computer not using. You're not. That's not open. Okay. A document currently have open. Sure. A document. Yeah. Oops, another location. Yeah, and you will dive into this like when you start learning about the difference between file encryption, data loss prevention, and those things. It starts to really click when you get into those things. Um, let's see. Oh, certification. Okay, certification accreditation. I'm gonna look at the 11th hour and read this through because this one definitely stuck me a little bit. So, according to the 11th hour CISSP, this is also one of the other recommended books I would get. And I can give you a real quick litmus test of what works or what was effective and what wasn't, was looking at the state of my books. So, as you can see, this one hasn't really, I definitely wrote it in a little bit and add these labels. This one definitely got some use out of it. I kind of use that as a gauge for how much I'm getting into a book in particular. Like if I have to buy another book because I've used one book so much and done so much stuff, and especially if it's a tech related book, I tend to write in them a lot. I try to be pretty good about like not abusing the covers, but I definitely get the use out of my books when I'm really diving into them. So with that, let's see. Let's go to those definitions. Particularly, okay. Certification means a system that has been certified to meet the security requirements of the data owner. Certification considers the system the security measures taken to protect the system and the residual risk represented by the system. Accreditation is the data owner's acceptance of the certification and of the residual risk, which is required before the system is put into production. So let's see. So there's a bunch of security requirements that are a certification, like you check a box check basically. When it's accredited, that's the data owner accrediting that system, saying, "Hey, it's ready to go." So think of accreditation, meaning the owner is going to give it its credence to move forward into production, and certification is basically leaning more towards a specific set of requirements through like ISO certifications, basically some kind of industry thing. So certifications, like those exams, accreditation is like going through whoever owns that stuff. And I'm going to say that I'll probably repeat certain things over and over at each of these domains. How your miles will vary in the exam. Some of this stuff you might see a lot of questions on, some you won't. It will really help if you go in with some real world experience, whether it be your own or listening to enough people's stories. So if you don't have enough real world experience, I highly encourage you to find videos and content that speak on specific topics and dive into things. Even some of the dry, boring stuff. It will start to click. If you've seen this in the real world, just think about all the things that did work or didn't specifically work in your past environments and think of what your manager would have or should have done from the decision-making process, and that will help you too. Because the first attempt I took this, of my attempt one of two, I definitely came in with like the in the weeds mindset, not the big picture mindset, and that will a lot of the experienced people stumble that way. Let's see, back to the content. Let's see what else we have here. Certification accreditation. I'm gonna update that stuff when I'm done. Oh, okay, destruction. And I have some real world stories about these. So the data destruction is at the end of the state when you're done using data, when you're destroying it. There's a few things you'll need to know as far as the different methods of destruction and which ones are more effective for completely destroying the data when it needs to be destroyed. You might hear things on data retention. I'll talk about a real world story with data destruction. It goes back to long before I had aspirations to work in security specifically. I did desktop support. And one thing I had to do very often for one reason or another was, and this is in more than one role I worked in, was doing some form of data recovery. Somebody would come in saying, "Hey, my files are gone, blah blah, or my hard drive crashed, blah blah blah," or my favorite, yeah, my son slash daughter spilled something on their drink on my keyboard, and my laptop crashed. Okay, your son spilled their drink on your computer. Yeah. Your son's like 8 or 9 years old, right? Yeah. Yeah, they spilled it. They were playing on it or something. I smelled beer on the keyboard. That's not the story I'm going to. That's just something that would happen often. I'm sure some of you that have done that work can relate to. Anyway, the story I relate to was A, recovering that data, but then and B, I kind of got a little experience in recovering data off of hard drives and had a few instances of my own, not beer spilling on a hard drive on a computer, but like just real data loss, either bad sectors on a hard drive, things like that. And I'd find different programs online that could help me recover that data. So then I started having fun with it, and I started like getting into. I'm sure you're familiar with the term dumpster diving, and I didn't do this a lot, but I did notice in a complex I lived in, I found a couple of hard drives. So what did I do? I would go and I'd get them out of the trash, and I wouldn't like go to like all over the place looking for these, but like especially if I found like more than 3 or 4, because at the time I was living close to a couple of colleges, so there you get the high turnover students. Who knows what happens to these computers? And I'd find a couple of hard drives in the trash, and I try and recover the data. Almost every time, especially from anything around the colleges, I could recover data. Uh, Thankfully, there wasn't anything report to police worthy, if you get my drift. But definitely some stuff on there. I'm like, okay, this is wow, that's a lot of beer. Or other things. In some cases, some like financial stuff, and I would destroy this stuff. Which brings me to the point: if you really wanted to ensure the data cannot be recovered, destruction, like shred it, burn it, or melt it, basically, is your most surefire way to ensure that data will not be recovered. There's a bunch of other things. I remember back in my Navy days, we used to have to degauss drives, and particularly like degaussing monitors because of the electromagnetic fields you get. If you have the old CRT monitors, they would get like this rainbowy thing in the corner, and a degausser would typically like demagnetize it. And I'm probably getting that wrong, but anyway. So and as part of the process of destroying old hard drives, we would degauss them. So you get this big. I wish I had one. I don't have one, but they're these really big. Let me find a degausser. No, wasn't one of those. Yeah, this guy. Yeah. So you get one of these big like degaussers. For you kids watching this video, and by kids I pretty much mean anybody who was born after 1990. Yeah, most of you probably hadn't seen like CRTs or heaven forbid had helped somebody move a CRT TV. You younger kids are so lucky. Anywho, we had these big round things, and we'd have to like and degauss either screens or destroying old hard drives. That's all I had on that. honestly, this domain's kind of short, so I'm not going to like drag this out. I'll add some more stuff in here on different destruction methods, and then the analogy I use for certification accreditation. Let's see what else is in there. There was some stuff on different standards and organizations, like all the different ISOs. You're not gonna have to remember them all. Honestly, like getting the Cliff Notes version definition of what the ISOs are, it would probably be helpful. Let me see if I can find in my notes what I do for. No, where are you? Oh, okay. Ask security. Yeah, on my first attempt, this is how I took my notes. I wouldn't say the entire time, but like when I got the 24-hour, the 11th hour CISSP, I basically like decided I'm gonna brain dump a bunch of stuff written down and do it in different directions that will force me to like remember, hey, I turned it this way. That didn't work as effectively, but definitely writing stuff down helped. Oh, here we go. I got some definitions. So, destroying sensitive data. Yeah, knowing stuff like data remnants, that's data remaining after an attempted erasure, erasing, clearing, purging, degaussing, and finally destruction. Like you're definitely getting a good idea between the differences of those will help. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, the ownership one's definitely more in domain 2 than 1, but you're not going to be quizzed on. You're not going to get. I'm going to say I highly doubt with a high confidence that you're not going to see questions on the test, or many practice questions that say this activity is in domain this activity is this in this domain. No, the only time you're going to see stuff that you have to definitely know the domain it's in, from what I've seen, is when you're doing the practice test on the mobile app. If you wanted to do practice questions based on an individual domain, that's when you'd select that. Outside of that, get familiar with what the material is and not necessarily what domain it's in. You'll kind of get a good idea of what's in what. Let's see. Yeah, classifications. Another thing, asset security, understanding the difference between PII, PHI. And PII is basically stuff that can identify an individual. That's the NIST 800-122. You're not going to, like I said, get familiar with what these things are rather than the specific terminology alone. PHI being health-related info. Basically the same thing as PI, but the health instance. So if you see H's and stuff, it's probably going to be health-related, and it'll lean towards that. Let me see here. Ownership, yeah. Like I said, the asset security one's the smallest one. The next one up is going to be the security architecture and engineering. I don't know if I'll be able to do that in one video alone if I want to keep these like around 20 to 25 minutes or so. I'll see how that goes. I'll try to make it abbreviated. That will be a lot of effort though. Let's see. Yeah, the classifications, destroying sensitive data. That's important. Okay, that was there. What do we have here? Okay, yeah, data, the states. Those are important. So honestly, most of the stuff here, and I'll include some of the other things with destruction. So let's see. That's pretty much all that's going to cover for domain 2. Next up, like I said, I'll be working on domain 3. That's going to be the big one. And honestly, that's probably one of the main. Domain 3 is probably one of the only reasons I'm keeping the book around a little bit longer than I need to, because there's a lot of stuff in there that it covers that I not only granted I passed it, but I was like, ooh, don't really feel comfortable with this because there's so much material in there. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Take care. Feel free to drop a comment in for suggestions. I know this is unpolished, and I probably got a bunch of different audio related or even editing errors. I'm doing this all in one take, and don't have any like post-production edits planned for these at the moment. As I get more reps in with these videos, I may include an intro or some editing. And with that, I will see you guys next time.